So the problem that this bill addresses, like a majority of states in the country, Rhode Island has a two-tiered minimum wage system, and we've all just heard quite a lot about the raising the minimum wage. And so, as you know, we've been raising the minimum wage over the past couple of years, and as we've been doing so, we have not addressed that second tier, the tipped minimum wage, which in Rhode Island is $2.89 an hour, and has been that since 1996. Lynette Roselle, I don't know if she's still, Lynette mentioned that we have one of the higher minimum wages in the country. In fact, we have one of the lowest tipped minimum wages in the country, and I think that's an important thing to think about, because when you take out the states that are attached to the federal, are looking at the federal laws, out of all the states, we're kind of on the bottom of the list in general, and we're certainly in the list, bottom of the list in New England. If you look at Connecticut, so thinking about the times you cross the border to go out to eat there, the Connecticut tipped minimum wage is $5.69 an hour, so that's almost double what we have in Rhode Island. So we know that there are thousands of tipped workers in Rhode Island, and there's a disproportionate amount of poverty. And I know that looking at the data, that means a lot of women in the state are really struggling. Women are disproportionately tipped workers. Many of them are parents, and this is a way that we need to address poverty in our state. So what this bill ultimately does is it slowly raises the minimum wage, the tipped minimum wage for tipped workers at $2.89 an hour, gradually raises it over the roughly about $1.50 an hour over the course of several years, with the idea that we meet parity with the minimum wage at whatever the minimum wage is in whatever that year they finally meet each other will be. And if 7 other states don't have a tipped minimum wage, and for me, the idea of bringing this all together is and eliminating that sub-layer of the $2.89 ultimately is a way to address some of the inequity. It's a way to address some of the power dynamics, and it's also a way to make sure that we get to a living wage for our professional workforce. People become wait staff and stay wait staff their whole lives, or are tipped workers in other industries, and they want to be able to raise their families and not do so in poverty. So this to me is an important distinction in order to do that. And let me be clear, even though the states have no sub-tip minimum wage, people are still tipped. I know when I cross the border into Connecticut, and I know that wait staff is making twice as much even in Connecticut as their tip minimum wage. I'm not thinking about that when I tip their bill, when I put a tip on the bill. So, I came to this from looking at a lot of the data on what this really meant for women in our state and for tipped workers in general. There is a National Women's Law Center research on it, and there's also this White House report that came out in 2014, which just talks a lot about the minimum wage, but particularly about the tipped minimum wage and why that's important. And then I just started talking with wait staff in our state, and was really surprised that we had not even talked about that tipped minimum wage and what that effect was for wait staff. And honestly, I was a little disappointed that I didn't figure that out 2 years ago as we started raising the minimum wage, and really pressed for that ahead of time. So, as all of you know, I'm a strong believer that our economy grows when people have money in their pockets. And the more money we get into people's pockets, the more money they have to be able to spend. I think that this is the right thing to do for Rhode Island workers, and it's also the right thing to do for our state economy.